yedu Zimbabwe dhora takaita vanga ichirwiswa nama-western countries kuti ife zvachose investor nengave muno munyika chose chaunoda takwisa mutemo kuti chinofanira kutengwa neZimbabwe dhora mugoritsvaga nemazimatsuku.
Zvinhu zvakarongeka.
Imali! Ama-salaries!
Mosanenyu wana babai Jimi makaramba kuterera mashoko Zinodiwa na musiki Chonaika satanika Mosanenyu wana babai Jimi makaramba kuterera mashoko Zinodiwa na musiki Chonaika satanika Kutenga sai Mutengo huku wa kutenga sai Mutengo imbando ya wewe.
This is the free talk.
Mutengo imbando ya wewe. Tumigwa ya we makuru. Tumigwa ya we makuru. Unikumbusha unikumbusha.
Zimbabwe celebrated its 42nd birthday. The liberation of Zimbabwe from white colonial rule was celebrated here or commemorated here in Bulawayo, where for the very first time it was taken out of Harare, where all the celebrations have been happening, to Bulawayo, the industrial hub of Zimbabwe, or a once industrial hub of Zimbabwe. Now, we are in the city of Bulawayo, and this week on Free Talk, we are talking economics, we are talking business, we are talking industry. On this edition of your favorite show, the #1 political, social, economic show in the country, Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation, we are talking economics here on the Free Talk. With me, your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. Welcome to Bulawayo and enjoy the conversation. Zimbabwe just turned 42 years and of attaining independence and liberation from white colonial rule. But the biggest elephant in the room is, have we attained economic independence? Are we independent as a nation economically, or we are still colonial, enslaved to other bigger economies? The new colonization that does not involve guns or slave work, but involves our pockets. Now, to help us discuss the issue around the economy and understand where Zimbabwe is going is the CEO of the United Refineries, also the chairperson of ZIDA, Chamisa. Thank you very much, Sir, for allowing us to come into your space and to talk to you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Beautiful. Now, the biggest elephant in the room, Chair, is the economy, Zimbabwe economy. Some believe that we are not yet economically liberated as a people. What is your view on that aspect?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer succinctly, but I can relate, I can understand why there would be a view that is along those lines. think the first thing is the ability, the capacity of individuals to earn an income. Is that better or is it less? That's one at an individual level. We need to perhaps rate that. Then secondly, we need to look at the economy itself. And in terms of globalization, are we able to capture the value? And the two are related. Are we able to capture the value? Are we a resource-based economy and we export resources and those resources are value added elsewhere to the benefit of other economies? So when we say to be economically independent, it speaks of the structure of national output and how it relates to the rest of the world, but it also speaks to the individual, at an individual level. Some have spoken or talked about a wage-led economy. So those are some of the views that one can have when we talk about economic independence. It's very difficult to be economically separate from a globalized, in a globalized world, because we are globally integrated. We are a small country, relatively small country, on a planet that has 7.5 billion people. So it's very difficult for the 15, 17 million of us to be insular. So there has to be some relationship. The question is not should we isolate ourselves, it's how. It's how do we relate and interface in terms of investment, in terms of trade, in terms of economic activity.
But looking at Zimbabwe's dependence to other countries where we've got a huge import bill, and also we've become sort of a receiver of finished products most of the time. How does that affect us in terms of being independent economically as a nation?
Yes, it's quite an issue, and we've been, since 2011, as part of the Buy Zimbabwe campaign, industry and business in general has pointed out this fact, and we are glad that, even from a government and public sector point of view, there's clarity. There's a local content policy that is being worked on, and precisely to address those needs. I'm glad that our supermarket shelves, mostly now, the majority, if we look at 60 to 70%, it's locally made products. But it's more than that. Some of those products are locally made, but using foreign raw materials. And so we have to keep going further and further back to localize. This is why the conversation about localizing value chains. For example, in our sector, which is the cooking oil sector, we're now saying our farmers, it's not good enough to have the cooking oil being refined and packed in Zimbabwe. We also want the raw material, the soya bean, the cotton seeds, the sunflower seeds, they must be grown in Zimbabwe so that the value chain is localized. You go back further, the fertilizers that go into the soya bean, into the cotton, they must be localized as well. You go further, the mechanization that supports agriculture. Should we be importing tractors or should we now be moving further? So we have to look at how do we, in each sector, this is just one example, it's an example of a sector, of how you progressively and continually localize it. That's how you become economically independent. You can determine your destiny in terms of pricing. You are not vulnerable to the global price shocks and things like that. So that's where we need to be looking.
Were we not once where we had our own fertilizer coming from several chemicals, where we had our own farmers producing cotton seed, and we actually had Kaduma, Ginal and stuff like that? Were we not there? What went wrong in these 42 years?
So the question, were we not there? Yes, we were there at some point, but the structure of the global economy was very different. The way trade was happening was very different then. China was not a big factor then. China is a factor now. Markets have changed. Mechanization has changed as well. And nations that previously were happy importing certain things. Also, remember, we're not the only ones in the world. When we say we want to value add, we have to be really strong. And what happened during the economic structural adjustment program period was to try and address these issues of competitiveness, because other nations also started saying, hey, why are we importing finished goods from Rhodesia or from Zimbabwe? Let's value add in our country. So there's it's a competitive landscape. China came onto the scene on textiles. So the David Whiteheads of this world, the cone textiles, started to have challenges because suddenly China, which could subsidize in those days, in the early 2000s, they were using a devalued exchange rate, which made their exports much cheaper, very hard to compete with, and they had a war chest. So the global structure of trade changed in the late 90s to the mid 2000s, but it's changing again, where there's the pendulum is swinging towards looking at more because of the climatic shocks that we are seeing, because of global shocks like COVID-19 that we are seeing. These all point to a necessary continual readjustment and change. So nations are now looking at more nationalistic, more insular, an insular view to trade, to say, look, we need resilience. It's not just about being globally integrated, it's also about resilience. What happens when you cannot cross the ocean? Would you let your people starve for the sake of globalization? And so nations are starting to say, there's a measure of local resilience that we need to have. There's a measure of regional resilience that we need to have. And we saw that during COVID-19. If COVID had gone on for much longer, nations in sub-Saharan Africa would have suffered quite a lot because they depend so much on foreign nations for trade. So there's a measure of resilience. So we are kind of going back to that era, maybe pre-1995 and pre-1980, where nations required a certain measure of local, inner country or in-country resilience. And so that's why it becomes necessary for Buy Zimbabwe. That's why it becomes necessary for localization of value chains.
You say that the economies of nations change. Why will we stagnate? Why will we caught flat-footed as a nation?
Well, we've got a lot of challenges. I mean, we've had lots of policy missteps. I mean, we've made some policies that were not to our advantage, and not narrowly as to say that government policy, but for example, adopting the ISA. The way we did may not have been a good idea. It may have been a policy mistake. We could have done it maybe differently. Hindsight is 20/20 vision. We've also had immense macroeconomic. I mean, we went into hyperinflation. We had a land reform program whose outcome turned out very different to what was expected, and agriculture suffered. Along with it, agribusinesses, and so that is being rebuilt today, but it's slow. But it's a journey that started in 1980 at independence, and let's remember that independence was about land and about economic emancipation. The land was not for the sake of land; it was to access productive land to be able to produce, and that production, the means of production, were in the hands of just a few. And so this is the journey, very messy and not as neat as maybe those that envisioned the outcomes of the liberation struggle had in mind. But here we find ourselves having gone through some rough parts, some narrow parts, some unexpected outcomes. And so here we are. We've also made some policies that were not business friendly and were not economy friendly. And so we find ourselves in a difficult situation from time to time.
But what are we doing going forward? Because we're going to get to 52, 62 and we're still crying. What are we doing to ensure that, as you say, that building resilience, regional sustainability, are we there? Do we have those policies that can get us there?
I think the answer to your question is we can get there. We can get there, but choices have to be made. There has to be consensus. Consensus not just within government. Government within itself will need consensus to agree, whether it's a Ministry of Industry, Agriculture, to say we are an agri-economy. Having industry and agriculture separate is probably not as wise. Let's work together and see how we create a vibrant agribusiness, secure ourselves from a food security. Yeah, those things are already happening. It's the outcomes now, the policies that are crafted to achieve a cohesive. And there's been a lot of successes that have happened in the agri sector. We've seen in horticulture, exports. So it's not just resilience, to feed ourselves, but also to earn exports. And we've seen horticulture export going to Europe. We've restarted. We've seen beef exports in a small way, not as big as the CSC days, but we've seen. So there are green shoots that show that with support for private sector activity that is import substitutive, that is export generative, if we have policies that look at those two things and make sure that there is the ease of exports, removing red tape from exports, making it easier, those nations that import from Zimbabwe are already making it tough for us. So we need to make it easier for ourselves. So policies that support value chains, support lowering the costs. Our fertilizer costs are very high. They were very high even before this Ukraine-Russia situation. So we need to look at how do we lower fertilizer costs. What policies are required to make sure that our fertilizer input costs are low. This is how you build an efficient and competitive. You look at the big ticket items. What are our top 3 cost drivers? And what are the policies that are attendant to those that can lead to a competitive product, end product, so then we become export competitive. So then we are able to support our local consumers without them feeling the pinch of very expensive commodities, but it's a holistic approach that we need to take.
Now, when you say we've got very expensive commodities and we're pushing the Zimbabwe is open for business, do we become an attractive destination for investors in that environment?
Well, I think the question of being attractive, fortunately for countries, is not static. It is dynamic. One has to continually push the boundaries and push the efficiency curve to make sure that you become more and more attractive. The question would be, are we more attractive than last year? Are we more attractive than 10 years ago? And so we must answer that question as we progress and map it out and say, look, as a cost base, our regulations, do they make it easy for assembly industries? Somebody wants to set up a bus assembly plant, a car assembly plant. Is Zimbabwe attractive?
Is it?
At the moment, we have a lot of work to do. We have advantages in terms of geography. I think we have advantages in terms of skilled labor force or potentially skillable labor force. So we have a lot of advantages, but we're not there yet. And there's a lot that's in our interest to make life much easier for somebody to say, yes, Zimbabwe is my destination. Just macroeconomic stability. We need to work on that long term. A year's stability is not enough to be convincing. We have to be putting a track record of stability. And those are the things that we have to demonstrate to the rest of the world and convince them through our policy choices and the policies that we set in place.
But how much of politics is a hindrance to investment in our country?
Well, politics is, politics is the tone setter in terms of policy. We derive policy from politics. So I think it's very important. It's a very important factor. Whatever is determined in the political sphere tends to spill over our relationships globally with our politics, or how we are viewed politically tends to affect the economics. And this is the difficulty that we have. It's very difficult to separate the two. Some countries have succeeded by and large, maintaining an economy that is basically unscathed by political activity. We need to aspire, I think, to those nations where we can create that stability without necessarily melding the two together.
But have you ever at any point sat in your CEO's chair and just look like and just say to yourself, but politics is killing me?
Well, I don't think I've looked at it that way. I've always looked at up to a policy level, because then you're objective. I'm not a politician, I'm a businessman. I'm a finance type brain, and so I look at things from that lens. The politics, it becomes a little bit too distant for me because I'm not conversant with the dynamics of what is needed and what is required. And unfortunately, I have that handicap. So I go in as far as looking at the policy. The policies that have been put in place, are they conducive? Are they sustainable? Can we sustain this? So that's kind of where, and I know the policies are derived from our politics. So the two, there is a definite relationship.
Let's talk about the currency. A lot of investors, when they put their money in, they want to be able to take it out when they want. And this appears to be something that we're grappling with. How deep of a problem is it?
Well, it is a challenge that we need to work through. It is part of the things I said are in our in-tray that we need to work through and work on, because it's a return of capital and return on capital are very important aspects to investment. And we obviously need an environment that allows for that to happen. But let's realize that our country has had foreign currency sort of challenges for a long time. Our currency inflows have always been seasonal, affected by tobacco, changing now because of global mineral prices. So last year we saw close to 10 billion of inflows coming into the country. This is significant by any measure for a little country such as ours. On a per capita basis, on a national basis, whatever way you look at it. But we are a forex dependent country for the reasons I've mentioned, because a lot of the products we consume are foreign currency dependent. The solution to release that foreign currency so that it works for investment and for investors and for other, what I'd call capital formation type activities, we have to remove consumptive type expenditure out of the forex arena by producing locally. Because of the land issue or the land reform in 2000, we need to rebuild our agriculture. And that is the work that Ministry of Agriculture, fortunately, we've seen programs, multiple programs in the area in an attempt to address this. So I think nationally everyone is aware that we need to restore that. And so once you restore that, my view is that you will release a lot of the capital to get into the arena of FDI flows, to be able to create an ecosystem that allows for return of capital. That said, there's a lot of investors who are in Zimbabwe who are export type businesses who have their own forex, and they can pay dividends and they can return capital, they can repay certain loans. That's the thing about FDI, is you have to have a good foreign currency ecosystem that generates foreign currency, that allocates it in a way that leads to balanced growth. Because we also don't want a situation where investment comes in only to go out, because then you're just a pass-through. You're a haven for washing money, and money goes out immediately. So it must be investment that's also there to stay and generate value for the country. At the same time, you need a basis of allocating foreign currency in a way that is balanced and leads to growth.
But do you think that the local currency is the way to go at the moment?
Well, I think that's an arena again for government to decide. As business, we've always responded. We are very clear that those charged with governance set policies. Business merely responds to the policies. We've been through a dollarized economy. Not by choice. Business didn't sit down and say, do we want a dollarized economy? But we found ourselves fully dollarized in February 2009, and we responded. Production, output in businesses like this went down to maybe 10%, and we built it up from there. And then we saw the introduction of a local currency. Again, business responded. We have a dualized type business. Because some customers still prefer US dollars, some still want to use the local currency. again, businesses had to configure into that dualized system of managing business, which is very difficult, by the way. To manage two currencies in a business is very tricky and can be very difficult. We spent time, worked with our management teams as industry, and figured out how to navigate a dualized economy, which is what we were in. Now there is talk of a local currency. There are pros and cons to a local currency. A local currency will work provided that there is fiscal discipline, provided that the local currency is protected. Currencies are about acceptance, wide acceptance, acceptability. I can say I'm selling this product for local currency, but if it's not acceptable, once I've earned it, then you've got a problem. Then you've got a challenge. At the moment, local suppliers will take RTGS. We can pay for raw materials, so it is acceptable. But is it widely acceptable? Availability. Is that currency widely available? We're starting to see some businesses or some customers saying, I don't have local currency to pay you. Can I pay you in US dollars? That's actually what's taking place. So if the currency is not available, then you will have challenges. So there are pros and cons. On the other side, there is dollarization. Do we go to dollars? I said that when we went to dollars, demand plummeted. We don't have enough dollars to run the economy. There's not enough dollars out there from what we've seen, because every time we say we are selling exclusively in dollars, demand goes down by 60-70%. That's what we've seen, certainly in essential commodities. So these are the challenges of policy choices that we make: de-dollarize, re-dollarize, and that's where we find ourselves in at the moment.
You see the challenges for running a business in a dual currency. Can you just share some of the challenges?
Well, some of the challenges is that, if somebody is paying in local currency for a product, what exchange rate are you using? Because for some of the vendors who are in the public space who buy commodities, they've got a different exchange rate. We might be working at the official rate, they are working at a different rate. So it's difficult to come to an agreement. One is at 300 and the other is at 150. How do you then reconcile those figures? Even from an accounting point of view, at what rate do you account for a sale? Our runners or people that will sell to us raw materials convert currency at a different rate. You account for that, the margins don't quite come out. So these are some of the challenges, and it's primarily to do with the fact that we do not have a widely accepted exchange rate for foreign currency. We have got not just one rate. Even when people say the parallel rate or the street rate, those street rates range from today at 290 to 330. There's no way you can run a business with such a wide margin of exchange rates. This is it's very difficult to run a business with so many rates, and then you've got the official rate to add to the issue. So our challenge is one of a reference rate, and the auction was supposed to provide this a widely accepted rate across the economy, a reference, what we call a reference rate for business. When we pay somebody a wage, what is your reference rate? And this is where we've got difficulties and challenges. And we are hoping that sooner rather than later, we will resolve the issue of finding. I see lately government has introduced a policy where duties are paid in local currency. All that is good because it creates demand for local dollars, and it encourages a flow and price discovery, so that we have price discovery and we have a single reference rate that's widely used. Will you completely obliterate the parallel rate? No economy has ever done that. because of the convenience, because some people still prefer. But for us as formal businesses, to protect myself as a management team, I need a receipt whenever there is foreign currency. We are not able to do some of the, but there are some that are in a different space that will want just no traceability. I change my money, I get cash, there's no record of that. But we need a widely accepted exchange rate, reference rate for foreign currency. And that is the work that government and the authorities are seized with, an unenviable task in a very difficult terrain.
You said the auction rate or the auction system was supposed to provide that reference. Are you implying that it has failed?
No, it hasn't failed. I think the journey is still there because we still make recommendation. Business, public sector were agreed that that was the way to go. And we were agreed that it was a principle of price discovery that we were supposed to pursue. But there are other aspirations and things to balance in the economy. Pricing, stability of pricing, which is a Reserve Bank aspiration. They want stable prices. Do you have stable prices when you've got some players in the economy with more RTGS than everybody else and can come and say, look, I'll pay 400 for all your currency. So how do you balance that out? So you need fail-safes, you need a mechanism. We've even talked about Reuters system. Now there's an interbank system. All those are efforts to achieve the same thing we said in 2020. You need a reference rate to price products and wages. Prices of incomes, prices of commodities and incomes need to have a rate. Then you will see the earlier question you asked, it will be easy to move in and out of whether it's foreign currency or local currency. Then you reach what is known as a point of indifference. I'm indifferent whether I'm holding a local currency or foreign currency because I can change it and I know at what rate I will change it. There's been conversation that's underpinned by market-based rate, but what is market? It's very difficult to, because you've got a few players. So what mechanisms do you put in place so that this is a truly market rate with minimal intervention? We need to arrive at that point. At this point, we have not arrived. So I don't think it's a question of has it failed. We have just simply not arrived at our set objective when we started this. We are not yet there. And none of us are in denial about that. Public sector, private sector, we are all agreed that, look, we don't have a single reference rate. No one can say, yes, we do. So if none of us can say, yes, we've got a single reference rate for incomes and prices, then it means we haven't arrived at our set objective, but we all know we need it.
Some argue that there is no political will and government consistency, and this is why the auction rate is failing, because government is fixing the rate and not allowing it to float freely.
I don't have evidence of that. I think it might be a feeling when things are not working or when the journey is taking longer. We can blame drivers, we can blame the driver, we can blame the road. For me, it's more the policy design and the mechanisms that support a single reference rate for a currency. And as I've said, it's already starting. We've got some very smart people. We've got it's just taken long to arrive at this point. Do I believe we could have arrived earlier? Probably we could have. We could have arrived here earlier. From private sector, we've been making the submissions to say, maybe let's tweak it this way, but you need consensus. Because it's not about what private sector wants. Because private sector, we are there to maximize, optimize profit. So our angle is always different. For government, it's there to trying to balance prices for the people, make sure that things are affordable and so on. So our aspirations, sometimes it takes us a long time to maybe find each other. And that's the process. I hope we can do these things quicker and quicker, but you've seen you can now buy currency from a bank. That's going to allow for some measure of price discovery because buyers and sellers will meet and agree at what price do they exchange. And that can be monitored. $1,000 is not a lot. We hope that that will progressively be adjusted so that we arrive at the very same point that I've highlighted earlier, to arrive at a single reference rate for prices and incomes, because this is very important for this economy. And when we say macroeconomic stability, all your efforts show up in one single place, this single reference rate. So everything we do must end up in a place where we can say, look, when I have $1 in my pocket, it is worth 200. And we all know, and everybody in this room agrees it is 200. If we still have a debate, you know what, I think it's 300. Oh no, but it's 150. Well, you know, we still have a lot of work to do. So we want to end those schisms and differences in not having this single references. Your accounting, the professional services, what a person charges, all that is dependent. Because we are benchmarking ourselves against the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is in dollars. So this is a very important exercise that as a nation we have to win. We have to win this battle of a single reference rate for incomes or prices.
But there's a policy inconsistent, not where government is saying that we want everyone to use our local currency. On the other hand, they are now paying part of the salaries for citizens in US dollars. The fuel industry, all of it is benchmarked in the US dollar, and you're being asked to trade in other TDS and buy in other TDS.
All that is just a manifestation of a lack of a single reference rate. We are running away from the issue. We are running away from the issue. If you have, I said, once you have a single reference rate for a long time, you become indifferent. To your point, we have been there before, where it was indifferent. If I'm holding local dollars, or because I can change it. Because I know there are institutions, formal institutions, I can go to a bureau de change, change it. I can go to a bank, and I know certainty, markets around uncertainty. If we all know that if I've got 1,000 ZWL or 1,000 of local currency, it is worth $5, I can go and change it at 200. There's no question. Even the person selling fuel, because soon, you know, business is competitive. It runs on competitive elements. If I say to myself, look, I'm only taking dollars, and the person selling edible oils across the road says, hey, look, I'll take your local currency, because he knows that he can change it. And that's across the economy. Right now, some people are certain they can change ZWL, some are not. So this creates an imbalance. Well, I can't take that rate because I'm not able to. I cannot price at that because I'm not able to access at this reference rate that you are referring to. It's not my reference rate. My reference rate is 300 because I don't have access to the auction. I don't have access to these institutions. So when you have a good framework for foreign currency, you've got the governance, you've got the institutions, and you've got the arithmetic, which is market determined. The arithmetic says our rate is, and is widely accepted, and it can be proved that, look, this is the prevailing exchange rate. All other countries, the other 187 countries in the world have that. So I don't see why Zimbabwe should be the exception and not be able to arrive at a point where we have a single reference rate for currency so that people can trade in and out of US dollars freely and at will. Then none of us will be worried about what currency am I selling in, because you know you can convert it back in and out of local currency. Until we achieve that, we are still on the journey and we haven't arrived.
Now let me take you to your other head with ZIDA chairperson, and I wanted to, ZIDA was brought in to make investors come in easy, to make the ease of doing business better. Now, you as a chairperson, tell us on a policy level where you and your board are taking ZIDA.
Well, ZIDA is really supposed to be the marketing agency for investments in the country. It's an investment promotion agency, and that's we intend to grow foreign direct investment. We intend to put ourselves out to the global community as a country that is available for investment. Our role is also to advise government on policies that will work and that will be attractive to investment. It's one thing to say we are available. It's another thing to create that environment that is actually attractive. And being attractive is relative to what else is out there. And so we want to benchmark ourselves and make sure that we are among the emerging economies that put themselves genuinely, and we have the credibility of the policies that an investor can come and realize a return on his investment. Because investment is not whether people are nice to us or they like us. It's about return, the prospect of return. And so we have to create an environment where the prospects of returns are attractive. And that's what ZIDA is essentially about.
And do we have those conditions? I mean, you've shared it since it was brought to life. Now tell us, do we have those conditions? Are we in the right direction?
Well, in terms of direction, yes, because we've had a certain measure of success in shortening, for example, company incorporation, the time that it takes for a person to incorporate a company in the country. We've managed to shorten that. It used to take weeks, sometimes months. We've shortened that to days. So that is a good success point. Now the work is to go further than that, to say, well, it's one thing to incorporate a company. I'm incorporating because I want to operate. So that's why we say the operating environment. So after incorporation, you want to operate. And it's that where there's a lot of work, because that involves municipalities. How long does it take you to get a factory license? How long does it take you to get water connected, electricity connected? This is what's called the ease of doing business. It's multiple municipalities. If you're setting up a factory in Kwekwe, if you're setting up a factory in Rafingora, what is your experience? And how do we get that experience to be seamless across the country? So this is a mammoth task. It's not something that in 3 years or 2 years, we incorporated in 2020 as ZIDA, the current setup of ZIDA. In 2 years, you can say, look, we've achieved. It takes working with local councils, working with government ministries for energy, working with regulators like ZERA, Reserve Bank, to make sure that all the documentation that an investor requires comes to the investor on time so that he can operate his investment. And that's the work that we are doing. I think ZIDA has added a lot of convenience to the investor, because now we have a one-stop shop, a place where you can go. Before, you would have to go to Ministry of Energy yourself, you'd have to go to Ministry of Tourism yourself. Now we have in Southampton Life Towers on the 5th mezzanine floor, we have a place, a one-stop shop, where you can go and interface with literally all of government in one place. And that is the advantage that ZIDA provides.
There's a lot of talk of corruption in this country, and getting ZIDA to be that powerful, doesn't it create a heaven for corruption in 1%? Is the one who's just paid corruptly to interface with all faces of government?
Corruption is always very tricky to tackle because it takes an entity that's willing to corrupt and somebody to be willing to be corrupted. I trust we are building an institution that is not immune but certainly resilient against and inflexible towards corruption. Certainly from a board point of view, when we introduce investors, when we talk to investors, we want to give them that assurance that we are not asking for anything except for the investment that they want to consummate in the country. And when we take them to government, that's why we don't charge. See, a lot of the corruption was happening because you'd have a consultant or consultants or middlemen. That's where a lot of the corruption would happen. But now we are saying, we'll take you to Ministry of Energy. If you want to go there, you need a license, you want to do solar, we will take you there as ZIDA. And certainly we've got tip-offs anonymous where corruption can be reported if there's any corrupt activity. So what we seek to do is to create an institution that really looks at service to the investor and not personal gain. It's a relatively small outfit, and we would like to keep its skilled professionals that acquit themselves professionally without getting on the wrong side of the law, because corruption is something that certainly we want not to be a part of our story as ZIDA.
You're not an executive chairman, and you're not part of the day-to-day running of ZIDA, but don't you think it would be wiser to have an executive chairman, because you are also a captain of industry and could have serious interest when investors come? They could destabilize your business as well.
Yes, it is possible. Fortunately, we have a very competent board that has diverse skills and people of reputation, and they will be watching. And I'm very satisfied with our internal governance systems in terms of declaring interest. Government is also, under the Public Entities and Corporate Governance Act, we follow that very diligently. Where there is a conflict, a person has to recuse themselves, they have to declare interest and so on, and we follow and we go by that. As I said, we've got tip-off mechanisms that are within where corruption can be reported if it's seen to or perceived to have taken place. And we are very open about the fact that we want to create an institution of integrity and run an institution that can stand up to scrutiny, because we've lost investment because of that. We certainly don't want to create an institution that creates further loss of investment, because we need the FDI, we need foreign direct investment in the country, we need friends who can come and invest and take us forward, because we are behind technologically, we are behind in so many things. And so we certainly don't want personal gain to stand in the way of national good and national interest. And so that's what guides us at the end of the day. As I said, corruption is very difficult to tackle, but certainly we've been very open as a board that we are committed to a corruption-free institution. And our founding CEO, may his dear soul rest in peace, Mr. Douglas Munatsi, was very strong in that area of standing for an institution that is clean, and that's what we would like to see.
As we close, Bulawayo used to be the industrial hub of this country. Where does it stand right now, Che?
Well, Bulawayo is still a large part of what happens in Zimbabwe, and but the journeys of cities, countries are evolving. They're not static, and we can be fixated on what was. I'm more keen to talk about what could be and what can be. We do have a city that is well serviced, factory sites, now they're shells, we call them, but they have rail sidings. We should look at that as an advantage, an opportunity to renew and refresh and repopulate these factories, not maybe with the religious institutions necessarily, but with factories where people can work, generate an income, and create the things we're talking about, import substitutive products that make us resilient, export generation, generate export. So I think it's an opportunity, and Bulawayo, where we are working as ZIDA is to profile it as an available network of infrastructure, or as available infrastructure that an investor can come. If you go into another country or into somewhere else other than Bulawayo, you have to set up and build your factory from scratch. Here, you are looking at just a repurposing, which is known as brownfield. It's easier to get into that and rebuild. Mutare is the same. Gweru, I think, is largely the same. So the country really, and that's why we're keen to attract FDI, because we've got all this infrastructure, rail infrastructure. Yes, in need of rehabilitation, refurbishment, but it's not greenfield. It's not cutting through a forest and building a new rail. It's not setting up a new factory. It's a brownfield, and so Bulawayo is one of those brownfield destinations that we'd like to see. You may be aware that in Harare, 90% of the industrial space is taken up Once that happens, people will be looking elsewhere, and I think Bulawayo needs to be ready for that sort of. But we need the link to market, whether it's market Harare, market Lusaka, market to Durban, further afield. We need that infrastructure to be rehabilitated. So rail is very critical for Bulawayo because it then connects the city, makes it affordable to produce in Bulawayo and service Harare, northern markets, Lusaka, Botswana, Gaborone. So we are well networked in terms of rail, but that rail link and road link is ripe for rehabilitation.
You also sit in the Presidential Advisory Council. What would you advise the President for the quick wins as we go forward? Because you've been saying you are looking at forward thinking and how we can improve our country. What would you say to him when you're sitting next to him on the quick wins for this country?
Thank you for that question. My advisory role is classified. What I advise the President is for his consumption, and so whatever I would advise him belongs to him, and it depends on what he has asked me to advise him on. But my thinking is what I've shared with you during our time together, my personal thinking. And so I try to be authentic and represent those thoughts of how can we develop, how can we get the 60% young population that's under 35 years of age to be actively engaged in economic activity for the future. Those are the things that I'm consumed with and thinking about in agriculture, in mining, in industry, in manufacturing. So that represents the thinking. As to specific advice, that remains classified and is for the consumption of the head of state, and I would like to keep my relationship pure in that regard, because if I give out advice to the public, that's corruption.
And I know you've got a passion in agriculture, and you've been supporting farmers to do soya. Maybe you can take this opportunity just to tell us how that's going.
Yes, it's going very well, relatively well in terms of direction. Last year we managed to contract 2,500 hectares, just under 30 farmers who are producing for us in that space. We would like to treble that in 2022, 2023, to grow our farmer book. Our plant requires 72,000 tons per year. At the moment we are getting just under 20,000 tons, which is a far cry from what we require. And we would like to grow, and that's why we are encouraging farmers under our Soybean Outgrowers Alliance program with some of our partners like ZFC, Seedco, Minerva, on the input side, to make sure that we equip farmers to grow oil seeds, soya beans in particular. We've started. There are other oil seeds, but we've looked at soya, and we are doing this countrywide. We are looking at farmers that are a minimum of 20 hectares, but farmers can agglomerate their farming activities as a group, and so we are willing to engage with groups as well, and bring them into our Soybean Outgrowers Alliance program. Again, this is the thrust to localize value chains and to localize raw material production. Our cooking oil, we celebrate that 90% of the cooking oil is packed locally, but now we want to say packed, yes, but produced also. This is very important also because Zimbabwe is an organic producer of many agricultural commodities. We have not yet harnessed the value of being an organic producer through traceability mechanisms. So as we develop, we would like to see us going into that space, and then perhaps maybe even exporting that organic element as the world becomes more health conscious and so on, and dietary needs are shifting. So this is what we are doing as United Refineries, and we are inviting farmers to get a hold of us on our websites, our social media pages, direct message or DMs. They can get in touch with us, and we'll be willing to look at them. We have a team of agronomists that go out and actually look at. We want serious farmers, so we do go out there and we do walk the ground and walk the field.
How is this impacted? Maybe just share with us the impact that it has had on the farmers' lives. the partnerships?
The impact on the farmers' lives has been really elating for us, because when we got in, we were looking at our own needs, but we discovered that farmers are, they've got needs as well. They are businessmen, and they're looking for support. They're looking for relationships, and we are creating a set of committed, a network of committed farmers who are working with us to produce soya beans. And we've seen families. There's one family, we went for a field day. The whole family was there, from the grandfather to the farmer, his brothers, his children. They were all on the farm, working the farm. And this for us showed another side that probably we didn't realize the extent of impact, because we're not just looking for the big sort of elite commercial farmers, but we also want to encourage, just as a nation, those with agronomic capacity, those who've been to Gwebi Agricultural College and other colleges around Zimbabwe, to say, look, this is your chance to make a change to yourself, because we are providing inputs under this program, and the farmer focuses on farming. So this has been, very encouraging to see the impact on the livelihoods and people around the country in the farming community who had given up hope, who had now gone back to the city because farming wasn't working, and now they are taking an interest, wanting to build a homestead because now they can see a future. And we are playing the long game. We are an 86-year-old company. We intend to be around for another 100 years. So this is for us a great relationship and multi-generational. So very excited about this program.
Amazing. No, thank you very much. Usisa Moyo, chairperson of ZIDA and CEO at United Refineries. But I know you are not political, but I would ask you to look into the camera and maybe just deliver a special message of independence to the people of Zimbabwe, to your clients also who have been supporting Royal for the past 72 years.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, happy independence, Zimbabwe. It's been a tough 42 years, but we can go into our future armed with experiences that maybe were not so pleasant, difficult experiences, painful experiences, costly experiences sometimes. But I think we can look forward and take that experience under our belt to create a new future for our country, where our children and our children's children can find a way, a means of living, not only surviving, but thriving in the Zimbabwe that we all believe is possible. Happy Independence Day, Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. This was the chairperson of ZIDA, the CEO of United Refineries here in Bulawayo, where we've taken your program of choice, Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now this is Free Talk. This is the alternative voice that hears everyone, that seeks to ensure that Zimbabwe is in dialogue. It ensures that Zimbabweans talk to each other, find lasting solutions to their own problems, and forge ahead. We believe Zimbabweans can. This is Free Talk with me, your host, as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga here in Bulawayo. Happy independence. Thank you, Zimbabwe. Happy 42. Keep supporting us.